Hi, everybody. Welcome to Carla Beltane, just being me. I'm the ringmaster here, Carla Beltane. We're going to have some silly challenge stuff today. Hang on, Okay, got rid of the echo. I actually have two computers going today, so I don't have to try flipping back and forth all the time with one monitor to see YouTube also. And I know there's a delay. Hi, Christy. Thanks for joining us. Hello to Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Nancy, it's going to be fun if Nancy's here. And say hello to Ace from Ace's Done Criminals. Just got through watching his streams, and the second one was hilarious. If you haven't seen it today, go back and work it. Hi, John. Yeah, okay, Kinky. Yeah. Oh, is Kilo a boy or a girl, dog or cat? Yeah, I know, Nancy. Oh God, John is here. All right. Well, our first video today is Meet Karen from the HOA, and it's not a very long one. The stream's only going to go about an hour today because Credence and Mikey come on a little bit after 4. Happy birthday to Kilo. And here we go.
I'm waiting for it, and it hasn't come today.
Can you imagine getting into a truck that is that far off the ground? I need a step ladder.
So, what are you saying?
I'm saying strict policy about washing the cars in the driveway. We don't allow it.
I can't wash my Jeep in the driveway.
No, you cannot, sir. It looks bad on the neighborhood. People drive through. We try to look perfect, and here you are washing this in the neighborhood.
So I can't.
That would be correct.
So where am I supposed to wash it?
At a car wash, there's
Oh,
plenty
because
of them
this
in
is
town.
gonna fit in a car wash. I suggest you get off my property now.
Can you please stop washing the vehicle?
What?
Okay. Can you imagine running in to somebody like that, or not running into, but him to your house and telling you can't wash your vehicle? Yeah. I would have to strangle somebody, or maybe get out some ice cubes and throw them where she's standing. Hi, Debbie. Welcome in. Yeah, I know. A vehicle that big can't go into regular car washes. There's no way. All right, let's see. Police called on property owners after HOA increases monthly fee to $350. Holy cow. Here we go. Hello.
significantly increase.
They say the rate hike comes on the heels of numerous other issues in the community. Now neighbors at Mandarin Lakes are banding together and trying to recall their HOA board members. CBS News Miami's Anna McAllister joins us with details.
They call the
This ought to be
A
good.
homeowners association meeting at the Mandarin Lakes neighborhood in Naranja Lakes goes off.
How many of you would want to live in an HOA neighborhood? There's no way that I could.
The rails. The Tuesday night meeting was cut short after residents say the called by the HOA.
ridiculous. Nobody got violent. We're simply talking.
Curious community members say the meeting escalated when the HOA board told residents their monthly fee would increase to $350 a month.
The HOA fee is going up for the second time in 1 year, and we were given notice of the increase
Exactly,
and not
Debbie.
things on the new budget don't make sense.
Resident Zoe Sosa says one of the things that doesn't make sense is how resident auto insurance for the security cars that community when security is now riding around in golf carts.
And we haven't seen any refund from the previous budget showing what happened with the cars, what happened with the maintenance of the cars, and what's going on.
In addition to the price hike and security, residents say there's broken amenities, cars getting constantly towed, and violent crimes happening in the neighborhood. But these residents tell us when they bring these problems up to the HOA, it falls on deaf ears.
They discredit me. They tell me, basically go away. That's how it is. You don't let it out.
We asked residents
I'd be living there in the first place. HOAs? Hell no. Hi, Beverly. Thanks for coming by.
how they feel about their HOA board.
Outraged, saddened, and threatened.
It's not a good feeling at all. My message is simply get it together. Please, help us help you. This is a community.
We reached out to Mandarin Lakes about the residents' concerns, and we were provided this statement explaining that the neighborhood had no choice but to amend its budget after receiving the 2023 budget from the Community Association.
This is a letter to the Homeowners Association requesting a special meeting so we can replace the board members.
Now residents say they're taking matters into their own hands in hopes of making changes at Mandarin Lakes. Residents say there will be a town hall and many of them tell me that they plan to be there. For now, reporting in Naranja Lakes, Anna McAllister, CBS News, Miami.
Yeah, it sounds like an HOA board that needs to be dissolved and have new people elected that actually know what's going on. You know. Okay. Yeah, I'm on an HOA thing today. HOA started charging parking fees on my field. Tow trucks rolled in.
Every single.
Now, this is an AI generated thing, so I don't know for sure if this is a real case or just a made up one. But it seemed after reading the title, I wanted to see it. And I'm like John, I don't watch the videos that I stream before I start streaming them. Here we go.
Car that had paid those fees was being hooked to a tow truck, and the HOA president was standing in the middle of my field watching it happen with the expression of a man who had just realized the most expensive mistake of his life was occurring. There was nothing left to do but watch, and I am 62 years old, and I am a retired commercial real estate attorney who spent 30 years in Charleston, South Carolina property law before I bought 106 acres outside Greenville in upstate South Carolina in Greenville County and decided the most valuable thing I could do with the knowledge I had accumulated over 3 decades was absolutely nothing professional with it ever again. I grow hay on the front 60 acres and lease the back 40 to a neighboring cattle farmer, and I live in a farmhouse that was built in 1951 and has good bones and drafty windows and a front porch that faces west and catches the late afternoon light in a way that I consider adequate compensation for every difficult thing that has ever happened to me. I am telling you my background up front because
That's a thing, Lisa. Hi, how you doing? Is HOAs can have a purpose, but some of them just get so out of hand because, they let power go to their head is what I think. Or they're just narcissists and mean.
it is the reason this story ended the way it did. A retired commercial real estate attorney who spent 30 years in property law does not discover that someone is charging parking fees on his land and wonder what ends are.
Hi, Jill. Glad you're here.
He already knows exactly what his options are. He has known for 30 years. And on a Saturday morning in September, when I drove past my front hay field on the way back from the field, saw orange traffic cones and a hand-painted sign reading event parking $20 and a man in a yellow vest collecting cash from a line of cars turning into my field, I did not wonder about my options at all. I simply started executing them in the order that made the most sense. The Palmetto Ridge Community Association governed the development of 194 homes that sat on the land directly east of my property in Greenville County. It had been built in phases between 2013 and 2018 and shared my eastern fence line for approximately a quarter mile.
Germaphobe. I couldn't imagine living that way. No, I just couldn't imagine living that way. I wish the best for her, Lisa. Yeah, Christy, give Kilo, excuse me, some extra treats and lots of extra scratches or pets, whichever he prefers, from all of us.
Along the boundary where my hay field met the development western edge. The first 5 years of their existence, the HOA and I had coexisted without incident in the way that a working farm and a residential development can coexist when everyone understands this and respects it. I had never had a formal dispute with them and had exchanged nothing more than occasional waves with residents who walked the side of the fence line in the evenings. The HOA president was a man named Victor Slade, who was 55 years old and who had been in the position for 2 years and who operated the association with the specific philosophy that revenue generation and community enhancement were interchangeable concepts that justified each other without requiring separate justification. Victor had a background in hospitality management, which meant he understood how to monetize space and traffic, and he looked at the open land around his community the way a hotel manager looks at an empty conference room, which was as an opportunity that was being wasted by not being booked. What Victor had identified was a regional fair and outdoor market called the Upstate Harvest Festival that drew approximately.
I think if people were illegally using his land for a parking lot and they were charging $20, that he should get the whole $20 because they're there illegally, and every single car on it is there illegally.
4,000 visitors annually to a fairground location about 2 miles from my property, and that had been experiencing a parking shortage for 3 years as attendance had grown beyond the fairground's capacity. Victor had apparently approached the festival organizers with a proposal to use adjacent private land as overflow parking at $20 per vehicle, and the festival organizers had accepted because they needed the capacity, and Victor had presented himself as someone with authority over the relevant land, which was my hay field and my property and my land that Victor had no authority over whatsoever. I do not know exactly when Victor decided that my field was a available parking operation. What I know,
I certainly hope that the hay was either not planted yet or had already been harvested. Otherwise, they're ruining his whole crop, too.
Was that I left my property at 8 in the morning on that Saturday to drive to the feed store, and my field was empty, and when I came back at 10:15 there were approximately 80 cars parked in my hay field. In organized rows guided by orange cones, and a second line of vehicles waiting to enter from the county road, and a man in a yellow vest collecting $20 bills at a folding table set up just inside my field entrance where my gate had been propped open with a concrete block. I sat in my truck at the county road for about 30 seconds looking at all of this, and then I pulled forward and parked on the road shoulder and got out and walked to the man in the yellow vest. He was in his 30s and had the cheerful efficiency of someone who was having a productive morning, and I asked him who had authorized this parking operation on this field, and he told me the Palmetto Ridge HOA had arranged it with the landowner and that it was all properly set up. I told him I was the landowner and I had not arranged anything with anyone, and he looked at me with the uncertainty of a man who has just received information that does not fit the framework.
Oops! A big oops.
He has been operating and all morning, and I told him calmly to stop collecting money and to call whoever had hired him immediately. Then I walked back to my truck and called my former law partner in Charleston, a man named Gerald Oates, who still practiced and who
Makes it even worse that the owner of the land is a retired lawyer. This one ought to get good.
I trusted more than anyone I had ever worked with professionally. Gerald answered on the second ring, and I described what I was looking at, and he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Anderson, you know exactly what to do here." And I said, "I do, and I just wanted to hear your voice." Before I started, and he laughed at me to call him when it was done. I want to tell you what and what, because the sequence matters, and it is the part of this story that reflects 30 years of knowing how property law actually works when someone decides to use your personal purposes without your permission. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office, where I report a commercial operation being conducted on my private property. The second call was to a towing company I had used before named Discovery, and I described the situation and asked whether they could have multiple units within 2 hours, and the owner said he could have 4 trucks there by 1 in the afternoon. The third call was to a licensed appraiser named Dennis Ford, who I had worked with during my practicing years, and who I asked to be at my property by 2 in the afternoon to document the condition of my hay field with a formal assessment of any damage caused by vehicle traffic, and I told him to photograph everything thoroughly. The fourth call was to Victor Slade, whose number I had found on the HOA's public website, and who answered with the brisk confidence of a man managing a successful event. I introduced myself as the owner of the field his parking operation was using, and I gave him exactly one opportunity to handle the situation correctly, which was to immediately cease all parking operations, remove all vehicles from my field, restore my to its normal position, and present himself at my property.
Yeah, guys, catching up to the chat, and Lisa, it is a very sad state for her to live that way. Oh, John, especially the second one of Ace's premieres today. That one is really good and funny as hell. I'm glad you're steadily getting better, Vicky, and that you could taste something today. Nothing worse than putting food in your mouth and going, "What am I eating?" Sorry if I'm a little quiet here, guys. I'm trying to catch up with the chat. Yeah, I could see it in Ohio too, Beverly. Okay, John, I have no idea yet what time KCC is going to be on. All right. Now that I finally caught up. Yes. No, John didn't break it. My brain is like thinking about 5 different things at once. So some things slip by me when that happens.
Within the hour to discuss restitution. I told him I had already contacted towing company and an appraiser and that the next 30 minutes represented his window to get ahead of what was coming rather than be buried by it. He told me there had clearly been a miscommunication and that...
Hey, Marty, hugs. I'm so glad you're here. Oops.
He was sure we could work it out, and I told him the window was 30 minutes and ended the call. Victor did not appear at my property within... What he did instead, based on the sequence of events that followed, was call the festival organizers and try to manage the situation from a distance, which is what people do when they have made a significant mistake and have convinced themselves that phone calls can... They cannot contain it when the sheriff is already on the way and the tow trucks have been dispatched and the property owner...
Beverly, the 6 p.m., is that for KCC? Oh. Duh. Vicky, thank you again for helping me out with times and things. So KCC will be on at 6, which is after Credence and Mikey's show. That's about 4:05, something like that.
At the gate of his own field with 30 years of property law in his head and nothing else to do on a Saturday afternoon. The first sheriff's deputy arrived at 11:40 and I met him at the road and walked him through the situation with the completeness and efficiency of someone who has prepared witnesses for depositions for 3 decades. I had my deed on my phone and I had a photograph of my gate in its normal closed position taken the previous Tuesday when I had done my regular fence check, and I had the screenshot of the HOA's event page that I had found while making my calls, which showed the parking operation advertised under the Palmetto Ridge Community Association's branding with a map that clearly showed my field labeled as overflow parking for the Upstate Harvest Festival. The deputy looked at all of it and made notes and walked the field perimeter and spoke briefly with the man in the yellow vest, who confirmed again that he had been hired by the HOA and gave the deputy van contact information. The deputy called Victor, and that conversation, from what the deputy told me afterward, was brief and conclusive.
Yeah, I thought that's what I said, Christy, that you're on about 4:05 or something like that. And, oh, you're just kidding. Okay, you really had me going there, Christy.
Victor had acknowledged that he had arranged the parking operation. He had believed he had authority to Jason.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for stopping by.
Impressed that he did not have a signed agreement with the field's owner and could not produce documentation of any permission having been granted. The deputy told me that absent a signed agreement, the operation constituted criminal trespass under South Carolina law, and that he was going to issue a warning to the man in the yellow vest to cease operations. Any further collection of fees after that warning would result in a citation. Cash collection stopped at 12:17. By that point, 114 vehicles were parked in my hay field, and the festival organizers were directing additional overflow traffic to a backup location they had scrambled to arrange, and the field entrance had been closed and the concrete block removed from my gate, which I locked with my own padlock at 12:23. The 4 tow trucks arrived at 1:05. I had spoken with the towing company owner again at noon and explained the updated situation, which was that the vehicles in my field were parked on private property without the owner's permission, and that I was authorizing their removal as the property owner, and he had confirmed that his drivers would handle it and that he would bring 4 units and a dispatcher to manage the process efficiently. What followed over the next 3.5 hours was the systematic removal of 114 vehicles from my hay field at the standard Greenville County private property tow rate of $185 per vehicle plus storage fees. I want to pause on that number for a moment because I think it deserves to sit there on its own. 114 vehicles at $185 each. The total before storage fees was $21,090, and every vehicle owner who wanted their car back would be paying that fee to Upstate Recovery, and the fee was entirely legitimate because every one of those vehicles was parked on private property without the owner's authorization, and the owner had contacted a licensed towing company and
I feel bad for the people that legitimately thought it was parking. I personally, I think it's wrong to have the cars towed and everything. I'm sure at the festival that there's some kind of sound system where they could make an announcement and give people X number of minutes to come and claim their car before it was towed. Because they just did what they thought was right. It's that HOA or whatever that is in the wrong. And I think that if towing fees were being paid, that the HOA should have to reimburse those people.
authorized the removal in accordance with South Carolina towing statutes. Victor arrived at my property at 2:15, by which point approximately 40 vehicles had already been removed and the remaining 74 were in various stages of being hooked and hauled, and the field entrance had a small gathering of festival visitors who had returned to the parking area and found either their car gone or a tow truck in the process of taking it, and who were experiencing a range of emotional responses to that discovery. Victor walked to where I was standing near the gate, and he looked at the field and at the tow trucks and at the line of people on their phones trying to locate the impound lot, and he looked at...
True, they would be able to sue the HOA, and that's what I'm talking about. Exactly, Jill. I don't live that rurally. I do live rural, but not that rurally. I don't even know if rurally is a word. If not, oh well, I just made it up.
me, and I could see him calculating and recalculating and finding of the calculation that produced a good outcome. He said there had been a misunderstanding about the authorization for the field, and I told him I understood that was how he was characterizing it, and that my attorney would be characterizing it differently. He asked whether we could stop the towing and work something out, and I told him the towing was authorized under South Carolina law and was proceeding, and that working something out was a conversation for attorneys, and that his association's attorney should call Gerald Oates in Charleston first thing Monday morning, and I gave him Gerald's number and walked back toward the house. Dennis Ford completed his field assessment by 3:30, and his findings were significant in the way that the findings of a licensed appraiser who documents a hay field that has had 114 vehicles parked on it during an active growing period are always significant. Compacted soil across approximately 60% of the field surface. Tire damage to established hay grass in multiple sections.
I don't think so.
Estimated restoration cost of $14,200 to remediate the
Whoa.
compaction and reseed the damaged areas and restore the field to productive condition before the next cutting cycle. Dennis documented everything with photographs and measurements and delivered a written report to me by email that evening. Gerald called me Sunday morning after I had sent him the complete documentation package, and he was thorough in his assessment in the way that 30 years of partnership teaches you to expect from someone you trust. He told me the HOA's exposure was significant and multifaceted, covering trespass.
Beverly, I understand he has a right to tow them because they were illegally parked on his property. But I feel bad for him, because they thought they were parking legally. They didn't know any better. Yeah, and I wonder if the farmer's insurance will cover it. If not, I bet he sues the HOA. And another thing, yeah. So right now, the HOA between towing fees and ruining parts of this farmer's crop are up to like $35,000 or $36,000. That's just the bare minimum before lawyers get involved, and there's lawyers' fee and everything else.
Pass and unauthorized commercial use of private property and the field restoration costs and a damages calculation for the commercial revenue the HOA had collected from the parking operation, which had totaled just over $300 based on the collection records the man in the yellow vest had provided to the deputy during his interview. He also said something that I had already considered, which was that the vehicle owners who had paid $20 to park in my field and whose cars had been towed had their own potential claim against the HOA for representing that the parking was authorized when it was not, and that the towing fees those owners had paid or would pay to retrieve their vehicles from impound were losses directly attributable to the HOA's misrepresentation, and that the HOA's exposure on that dimension alone was potentially substantial depending on how many of those 114 vehicle owners decided to pursue it. Gerald filed the civil complaint against the Palmetto Ridge Community Association and Victor Slate personally the following Tuesday in Greenville County Court of Common Pleas covering trespass and unauthorized commercial appropriation of private property and economic damages, field restoration assessment, and the commercial revenue figure and attorney fees. He also filed a formal complaint with the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs about the misrepresentation to vehicle owners and festival organizers regarding the HOA's authority over the parking field. What happened next developed on two tracks simultaneously, and the convergence of those two tracks is what produced a resolution faster than Gerald had projected when he filed. The first track was the legal proceeding, which moved on its normal timeline with Victor's attorney, a Greenville lawyer named Brady Holt, entering an appearance and filing an answer that attempted to characterize the situation as an administrative error resulting from a miscommunication with a community volunteer who had misrepresented his authority to the festival organizers, which was destruction of events that the documentary evidence, including the HOA event page advertising and the deputy's interview with Victor, did not support particularly well. The second track was the vehicle owners. Of the 114 cars that had been towed from my field, 93 of the owners had paid the towing and impound fees to retrieve their vehicles within the first...
I agree with you too, Beverly. Hi, Billy Buzz. Thanks for coming on us today. We're doing HOA junk.
And of those 93 vehicle owners Gerald identified through public filings that appeared in the following, 31 had retained attorneys and filed individual small claims or civil actions against the association for the towing fees they had paid as a result of the HOA's misrepresentation that the parking was authorized. 31 separate legal actions, each one representing a vehicle owner who had paid $20 to park and then paid $185 to get their car back because the HOA had told them the parking was legitimate when it was not. Brady Holt was managing Gerald's action and 31 separate vehicle owner claims simultaneously, and the HOA's insurance carrier, which had been notified of the aggregate exposure, was by the fifth week pushing hard for a comprehensive settlement because the alternative was defending a principal action and 31 ancillary claims in the same court system with the same underlying facts and the same documentary evidence available to every plaintiff. The settlement negotiation took 6 weeks, and Gerald described it to me as the most straightforward negotiation he had conducted in years because Brady Holt arrived at every session with the demeanor of a man whose client had given him full authority to resolve the matter and whose only remaining objective was to minimize the final number rather than contest the liability which had been established beyond any reasonable dispute by the time the first session convened. The settlement covered my field restoration costs in full at Dennis Ford's assessed figure. It covered Gerald's fees in full. It covered a damages payment for the commercial appropriation of my private property calculated at twice the revenue the HOA had collected from the parking operation, which Gerald had argued represented the minimum appropriate multiplier for unauthorized commercial use and which Brady had accepted without significant resistance. The HOA separately resolved the 31 vehicle owner claims through a global settlement that required them to reimburse each owner's towing and impound fees plus a nominal damages payment that Brady negotiated down from what the individual attorneys had initially demanded, but that still represented a total payout that, combined with my settlement, made the Upstate Harvest Festival parking operation the single most expensive community initiative in Palmetto Ridge's history by a considerable margin. Victor Slade did not resign from the board presidency immediately after the settlement was signed, which surprised some people in the community, but did not surprise me because men like that tend to read the end of their own story accurately until it has been written for them. He remained in his position for 4 more months, during which the HOA's annual budget had to be restructured to account settlement payments, and during which
Vicky told us, and I think it was Beverly earlier, that KCC is going on at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight.
a recall petition circulated among residents who had been paying higher dues to cover the costs of an event that had resulted in their neighbor's car towed. The recall succeeded, with 68% of participating homeowners voting to remove him, and Victor's board presidency ended on a Tuesday evening in February at a meeting I was not present for and had no need to attend. The new board president was a woman named Patricia Good, who had been a resident since the development opened and who called me the week after her election and introduced herself and told me directly that the board had engaged a property attorney to provide a formal opinion on the association's authority over common areas and adjacent private land before approving any future community initiatives, and that she wanted me to know that my fence line was my fence line and that her board understood that distinction. I told her I appreciated the call and that I looked forward to being an uncomplicated neighbor going forward, and she said she was counting on it, and we both laughed in the way that people laugh when a situation that was genuinely serious has resolved into something they can afford to find slightly absurd in retrospect. My hay field was reseeded in October, and the compaction remediation was completed by a soil specialist Dennis had recommended, and by the following spring the field was producing again at the yield rates I had established before the parking operation, and Dennis confirmed that a follow-up assessment had been complete and that there was no residual damage to the soil structure or the established grass varieties. I field in April looking at the new growth, and Saturday in September when I came back from the feed store and found orange cones and a hand-painted sign and a man in a yellow vest collecting $20 bills from strangers turning into my land. $3,200 they had collected on my land while I was buying feed at a store 8 miles away. The thing about property law that most people never need.
John, I've been noticing KCC's only been running about a little over an hour.
To know, but that I spent 30 years understanding, is that the law around private land in this country is not ambiguous when documentation is clear and the ownership is recorded and the trespass is documented in real time. Deputy and appraiser and 4 tow truck operator, 31 vehicle owners who all have the same story about what they were told when they paid to park. Set of facts that produces a favorable outcome for the person who organized the operation on land they did not own and did not have permission to use. Victor had left my hay field and seen a space and had made a specific it is not available space belongs to someone who in this case.
Sorry, my microphone decided to jump at me. Yeah, okay, guys, guess what? I'm getting connection loss, reconnection. So I think I'm going to end it on this note. I do have some more Karens to show you another day, and that's about it. So I thank you all very much for being here today. Love, peace, blessed be y'all.